You wake each morning assuming you're fully here. But what if you aren't? What if some sliver of you exists beyond the fabric of what you've always assumed was real? Not in a fantasy sense, but in a framework more profound than anything you can touch or name. In the rush of breakfast routines, in the noise of traffic or the hum of thought, you might miss it. But somewhere beneath all that, beneath the silent rhythm of your breath and the pull of gravity on your bones, there is motion. Not the movement of muscle or mind, but of something older, quieter, and infinitely more vast. Consider this possibility. What you know as yourself may be a limited edition, a particular setting on a dial that has many notches left untouched. Somewhere, some deeper expression of you might exist without time, without a face, without the need to remember. Not a dream, not a hallucination, just a presence operating silently in a layer of reality you've forgotten how to feel. We've been told reality has 4 dimensions: height, width, depth, and time. That these are the boundaries of existence. Yet even the most advanced minds of modern science, those decoding the math behind the cosmos, argue otherwise. They speak of extra folds in the universe's fabric, not imaginary, not decorative, essential, necessary to make sense of the strange rules that govern black holes, quantum fields, and the atoms beneath your skin. Among these layers lies a proposal so daring, so abstract, that most pass it off as metaphor. But it's not. The idea of an 11th dimension isn't science fiction. It's the framework upon which some of our most promising theories rest. But what does that mean for you? An individual moving through the world with a name, a history, and a body. If reality has 11 planes and you only feel 4, then you are navigating a puzzle with most of its pieces hidden from view. What you think is the complete picture may be just a sliver of a cosmic mural stretching far beyond your reach. This thought is not new. Across centuries and continents, seers, mystics, and scientists alike have traced the same outline in different languages. They've hinted that the I you speak from may not be anchored in your brain or trapped in your birth certificate. That who you are, truly, might spill beyond biology, past your lifespan, and into dimensions where identity becomes something else entirely. Perhaps what you call you is more like a projection cast onto a screen of time and space from a deeper origin point you can't yet name. What if that's not wild speculation, but an open door, one that beckons not with belief, but with possibility, an invitation to peer inward with a new kind of awareness and ask, what if I am more than this moment, more than this story? Throughout this unfolding reflection, we'll explore the 11th dimension, not as a physics lesson, but as a symbol of that larger mystery. We'll trace its threads through M theory and ancient philosophy, through the dreams of thinkers like Carl Jung and the quiet discoveries of consciousness, researchers who've begun to suspect that mind isn't limited to the brain. This isn't about answers, this is about listening to the parts of yourself you've learned to ignore, and the versions of reality that live just beneath the surface of what's visible. If you've ever asked impossible questions, if you've ever felt the urge to look past the obvious and wonder what else might be out there or in here, you're not alone. You belong to a long lineage of questioners, of explorers, not of the earth, but of meaning. And that search begins not with telescopes or microscopes, but with the decision to look again, to listen differently. Start with space. You move through it every day, forward and backward, up and down, left and right. Add time, and you get the flow of your life, the ticking line from birth toward wherever the end lies. But these motions, these frames, are only the visible threads in a much more intricate weave. M theory suggests the universe isn't built from dots or points, but from vibrating strands, strings that twist and hum in as many as 10 spatial directions, plus time. These directions aren't myths, They're mathematically required, yet you don't see them. You don't feel them. Why? Because they're curled inward, folded into dimensions so tight and fine they evade detection like breath lost in wind. Imagine them as threads wound into the thickness of a single page, there but inaccessible to touch or sight. You exist on what's called a three-brain, a kind of spatial membrane suspended in a higher dimensional field. Picture yourself like a figure sketched onto a piece of paper. You move across the page, but can never rise above it to see the air hovering just a whisper away. And that's only part of the puzzle. If multiple brains exist, whole universes layered like leaves in a book, then what seems solid, singular, and final may actually be the brief flicker of one layer in a multi-dimensional stack. Some physicists suggest the Big Bang itself might have been caused by the collision of two such brains. Not an explosion from nowhere, but a ripple caused by contact between planes of reality. What does this have to do with consciousness? Everything. If your existence unfolds on a lower dimensional sheet, then your perception is filtered through that lens, not because the higher dimensions aren't real, but because your senses weren't engineered to detect them. You don't see the full spectrum. You see only what your biology allows. But biology is not the boundary of being. When you glimpse something unexplainable, a déjà vu, a flicker of memory that doesn't belong, a dream that feels more solid than waking, it may not be imagination. It may be contact, the brushing of your limited self against a wider version you have forgotten. Maybe you're not only a name with a body. Maybe you're a signal being received, fragmented through time, translated through flesh. Carl Jung once suggested that the ego, the conscious mind, is not the total self, that beyond what you know as you lies a vast psychic field, a complete being encompassing everything you have been and everything you have yet to become. He called it the self, not as in self-image, but as the totality of being, both shadow and light, both personal and cosmic. This echoes traditions far older than modern psychology. In Vedic philosophy, the Atman, the innermost self, is not a thing to find but a truth to realize, not separate from the cosmos but identical to it, a reflection of the infinite caught in the mirror of the individual. Gnostic traditions describe the soul as dispersed, as though shattered into pieces scattered across different realities. And Theosophy layered the self even further, speaking of subtle bodies made of different vibrations, different densities of being. What you know as personality, they claimed, is merely the outermost shell. So what happens if consciousness is structured like this, layered, multidimensional, refracted across invisible frequencies? It would mean your daily awareness, the stream of thoughts and sensations you call now, is only the skin of a much deeper presence. Have you ever felt it? A dream so vivid you woke gasping, convinced it was more than fantasy. A sense of knowing something before it happens. A sudden wave of recognition in a place you've never been. These aren't errors, these are bleed-throughs. Evidence that the boundary between this life and the others, whether parallel, future, past, or something else entirely, is thinner than we assume. Some contemporary scientists are starting to lean in this direction, not because of mysticism, but because the math demands it. Some suggest that the brain is not a generator of awareness, but a filter, an antenna pulling consciousness in from somewhere else. The holonomic brain model, for instance, proposes that memory is not stored like files in a cabinet, but exists as a holographic interference pattern. One part contains the information of the whole, meaning what you know, feel, and perceive may be fragments of a totality that lives beyond neurons. This means the you sitting here listening, this moment of focus and reflection, is just one tuning. one frequency being picked up from a much broader spectrum. And in moments of deep silence, of sleep, of grief or awe, the dial shifts. The signal changes. You hear the voice of a version of yourself not bound to this time or this name. And maybe, in those brief flashes, you aren't being haunted by memory or tricked by illusion. Maybe something ancient is brushing against you. Maybe it's you elsewhere, reaching through the veil to remind this sliver of self that it is not alone. This doesn't require faith. It only requires attention, not to what's loud, but to what's soft. Not to what's explained, but to what's felt. The part of you that knows something's missing. The part that stares at the stars and aches, not just in wonder, but with the sense that something once known is now forgotten. That ache is not emptiness. It's a signal. A pulse from a deeper layer of your being asking to be remembered. In those quiet moments, when your mind stills and your story loosens, you might feel it. A presence not outside you, but within and beyond. A calm awareness watching the page of your life from the space between breaths. And when that happens, when the ache softens into recognition and the silence fills with meaning, you haven't imagined it. You've remembered, not who you were, not who you might become, but what you've always been, quietly, patiently, in the folds of the 11th dimension. If everything you've ever considered real is only a fraction of what exists, then how can you trust what you see? You've been taught that reality begins and ends with what your senses report. Sight, sound, touch, or feeding you data that shapes your world. But what if that data is filtered through limitations you've never questioned? What if your instruments, your body, your brain, are tuned to just one channel on a much larger frequency band, and every so often you catch static from the others? The universe, as science now tells us, might not be a flat, four-dimensional surface upon which your life plays out like a film strip. The more we peer into the abyss of quantum fields and cosmic structures, the more we find clues that whisper of extra layers, curled into the very scaffolding of existence. These dimensions aren't poetic metaphors, they're necessities demanded by equations trying to reconcile the deepest forces of nature. Not just the grand pillars like gravity and electromagnetism, but the more elusive ones, like the peculiar dance of subatomic particles, the mysterious breath of dark energy. Among these theories stands one that dares to unify them all, M theory, a model proposing that everything, from the flicker of a photon to the contours of space itself, is woven from tiny vibrating strands. But these strands don't just dance in 3 dimensions, they move across 10 spatial directions and 1 temporal thread, forming a total of 11 dimensions, an architecture so vast it can barely be imagined, let alone perceived. If you picture yourself as a figure etched on a thin sheet of existence, you may begin to understand your place. That sheet, your universe, is what physicists call a brain, short for membrane. It floats like a page among many others in a vast cosmic volume. Each brain may hold a separate universe, and yours is simply one of many. You live and move and breathe on this brain, confined to its dimensions like a drawing on a wall, unable to step back and see the rest of the structure in which it's embedded. And yet these brains aren't far apart. They may be separated by something more elusive than space, by direction itself, not up, not down, not left or right, but through a dimension you cannot picture. In this arrangement, whole realities may coexist inches apart, unreachable by conventional motion, but linked in ways we barely understand. One theory even suggests that our universe began not with an explosion from nothingness, but with the collision of two such brains. Imagine two invisible sheets brushing past each other, their contact igniting the birth of time and matter. This is not a tale spun by mystics. It is the consequence of our most advanced mathematical efforts. But if such structures exist, if our known universe is just a layer, then why should our consciousness be any different? Why should awareness be locked inside a skull or bound to flesh when the stage on which life plays out is 11-dimensional? You've probably felt it. Those moments when reality doesn't behave as expected, a dream that lingers like a scent, vivid and undeniable, yet nowhere to place it. An encounter with a stranger who feels like someone you've always known. A place you visit for the first time that wraps around you with eerie familiarity. These fragments aren't random. They might be signatures of something more fundamental. That your consciousness is not tied to a single strand of time, but is spread out like light refracted through a crystal, each ray touching different aspects of existence. Jung believed this. He saw the psyche not as a byproduct of brain chemistry, but as a multi-layered system, a vast ocean beneath the conscious wave we call the ego. He spoke of archetypes, deep symbols that cross cultures and eras, as if emerging from a shared field of meaning. He described the self not as identity, but as a totality, the whole of a person that includes both known and unknown, both seen and hidden. In that view, the individual isn't just a character in a story. They're the author, the reader, and the book itself. They're one thread in a complex weave, which includes dreams, instincts, traumas, and truths unspoken. Jung didn't think of this as fantasy. He saw it as psychological reality. The idea that your personal experience emerges from a field much wider than your biography. The Vedic sages of ancient India painted something similar. They spoke of Atman, the innermost self, as not merely a soul within a body, but as an extension of the infinite, Brahman. You are not a drop in the ocean, they said. You are the ocean in a drop. The limited sense of I is a veil. Behind it, a vast awareness waits. And then there are the Gnostics, early seekers who claim the soul was not singular but splintered. Their writings describe a human life as a fragmented beam of light scattered across dimensions, each shard reflecting some part of the original whole. Theosophical thought took this even further, suggesting that we live within a series of concentric layers, bodies not of flesh, but of frequency. You inhabit one, but are influenced by all, even if you're unaware. Now imagine your life through that lens. You walk into a room and feel uneasy. You dream of people who feel more real than those you've known for years. You hesitate at a decision, not because logic tells you so, but because something deeper whispers otherwise. What if those whispers come not from fear or fantasy, but from another part of you, one that exists beyond the reach of memory? If consciousness is not created by the brain, but merely channeled through it, then your sense of self may be more like a point of focus within a broader beam. Some theorists argue that the brain is like a receiver, a biological antenna tuning in to a field of awareness that is always present. In this view, the self you experience is just one radio station, but the airwaves are full of others. The holonomic brain theory supports this. It posits that memory and thought may be stored not in discrete locations, but holographically, patterns of interference that encode the whole within each part. This would mean your sense of continuity isn't local, it's distributed. And the deeper your attention, the more you begin to tune in to the broader signal. That broader signal may explain those fleeting, inexplicable experiences, the feeling that a dream is telling you something real, the sense that you've lived through a moment before it happens, the tears that fall after waking from a life that isn't yours. What if those are echoes? Not random noise, but fragments of other expressions of you, ones that exist in parallel, or perhaps on different brains entirely. Consider the reports of people who've stepped beyond death. Their hearts stopped, yet they returned with stories of sights and sensations beyond the body. Rooms viewed from the ceiling, words heard from behind closed doors. Their awareness untethered from neurons, yet precise, detailed, and vivid. If even one of these accounts is true, then consciousness cannot be a side effect of brain activity alone. Instead, it may be something more, something fundamental, flowing through the universe like gravity or light, and your body, your personality, may be a temporary mask worn by a timeless presence. That presence doesn't need belief, it reveals itself in moments. The kind you can't explain but can't forget. A sudden intuition, a shiver of awe, a silence that speaks, a memory that doesn't belong to this lifetime. These aren't errors in the system, they are invitations, doorways. Doorways that open not through action, but through stillness. When you stop thinking long enough to feel, when you turn down the noise of expectation and tune in to the frequency behind it all, in those moments something aligns. You may feel it in your chest, a warmth, a pull, not a command, not a word, but a presence that simply says, I am. And that I is not separate, it is you, not the you who worries about bills and errands, but the one who watches, the one who never left. When the boundary between waking and dreaming fades, when your roles and responsibilities dissolve, that presence sometimes steps forward, not loudly, not with fanfare, but with stillness so complete that you almost miss it. It doesn't offer answers, it offers remembrance. You remember not what you did or where you've been, but what you are. And in that remembering, something inside you exhales. Across time, cultures have described this as awakening, as enlightenment, as union. But those words can mislead. This is not about achieving something. It's about returning, about lifting the curtain on your own awareness to discover that you've been standing on a stage far bigger than you imagined. A stage with many acts, many players, all of them you. It may sound impossible, but impossibility is a boundary drawn by limited tools. The math doesn't lie. The models that describe your universe insist on more dimensions. The human experience, with its inexplicable knowing and layered inner lives, echoes the same thing. You aren't confined to the skin you wear. You're not reduced to the sum of your memories. You are a doorway through which something far greater peers into this world. So maybe the ache you feel in quiet moments isn't sadness. Maybe it's homesickness for the parts of you still out there, waiting, watching, dreaming alongside you. Not lost, not separate, just distant. Close enough to touch when the mind grows quiet and the soul begins to listen. And if that's true, then this life, this story you're living, is not your limit. It's your threshold, a beginning written in flesh and breath. And all the rest, all the unseen, the unspoken, the remembered in dreams and glimpsed in silence, that's the rest of the book. You just haven't turned the page yet. You have been taught to draw lines between self and other, between real and imagined, between what's possible and what's merely a dream. But the deeper you explore, the more those lines begin to blur. And not because you're drifting into illusion, but because those boundaries were never entirely solid to begin with. They were conveniences, tools of understanding. But truth is rarely that tidy. The reality you live in, the one you can point to and measure and name, may be nothing more than a single layer peeled from something far more complex. And occasionally, if you're quiet enough, you sense it. Not with your eyes, but with something older than vision. A hum beneath thought, a signal beneath noise, a knowing without source. You hesitate mid-sentence because a word doesn't feel right and you don't know why. You pause in a place you've never been and feel your chest tighten, not from fear but familiarity. You wake with a memory that doesn't belong to anything you've done, and yet it clings to your bones like it's always been there. These moments are not mistakes, they're markers. Evidence that the story you've accepted as your only life may just be the visible tip of something stretching beneath and beyond this page of time. When you sleep, your mind opens. Dreams are not just echoes of waking life shuffled and remixed by imagination. They are keys, maps, sometimes clumsy, sometimes cryptic, but always pointing somewhere. You've had one, haven't you? That dream. The one that didn't feel like fantasy. The one that stayed with you for days, for years. The dream that shook something loose in your chest and left you waking with a sense that something important had happened. Something real. In those moments, maybe you weren't dreaming. Maybe you were remembering or visiting. In deep sleep or trance, the body loosens its grip on the present. The mind steps aside, if only slightly, and in that openness, another signal can slip through. That signal might not be coming from this version of you, but from another, a self shaped in a different fold of reality, reaching through the veil of dimension to tap you on the shoulder and say, "We are not so separate." Some traditions have always known this. Indigenous peoples spoke of dream walkers, those who traveled at night into worlds beyond waking, gathering knowledge, healing wounds, walking paths unreachable by feet. Sufi mystics described the heart as a compass, constantly turning toward a center beyond space. Buddhist monks described layers of mind, each one closer to what they called non-duality, the state beyond self and other. And in the scientific world, the boundaries begin to echo the same tune. Psychedelic research has shown that under the right conditions, the sense of self, the ego, can dissolve completely, leaving behind a field of pure awareness. Subjects report feeling timeless, borderless, unconfined, not floating above their bodies, but completely beyond them, not separate from the world, but merged with it. They describe meeting versions of themselves that feel truer than the one they carry daily, and they return with the certainty that consciousness is not something they own, but something they swim in. These aren't anomalies, they're windows, glimpses through the cracks in the constructed wall we call the real. What we call altered states may actually be restored states, conditions under which the deeper signal breaks through. Think about it. You've always experienced the world through a filter. The brain sifts and selects. It decides what to highlight and what to discard. Not because it's deceptive, but because it has to. There's too much information, too many frequencies. If you saw all at once, you'd collapse under the weight. So your senses provide a streamlined experience, something manageable. But in that process, they also silence the deeper layers. They tune out the broader signal, and only in rare moments of sleep, of loss, of awe, does that barrier crack. In those cracks, you sometimes meet yourself. Or rather, you meet the part of yourself that exists outside this performance, the one who is not defined by your past, your name, your body, the one who watches, the one who waits. You've felt this watcher, maybe during loss, when grief strips away distraction and you're left with nothing but the ache. In that ache, something stirs, not to fix it, not to change it, but to hold it, silently, as if a deeper self steps forward in your pain, not to rescue you, but to remind you that you are not only the one who suffers, you are also the one who sees the suffering. That witness, calm, patient, eternal, might not be an aspect of you. It might be the real you. The others are just masks, roles, temporary vessels carrying fragments of your light. Carl Jung often described this deeper identity as a center, an axis around which your life turns. But unlike the ego which shouts, this center whispers. It doesn't push itself forward. It waits to be noticed. It shows itself through symbols, through dreams, through the strange alignment of events that feel too perfect to be coincidence. Synchronicity, he called it, the meeting of inner and outer meaning. Have you ever thought of someone seconds before they called you? Have you ever walked into a situation and felt like it was already familiar, as though time itself had looped? Have you ever made a decision you couldn't explain, only to discover later it was exactly right? These are not tricks. These are trails, breadcrumbs left by the parts of you that still remember the whole. This remembering is not intellectual. You don't learn it. You feel it. In your chest, in your spine, in the stillness that settles when everything else falls away. It's the sense that something true is nearby, not because it makes logical sense, but because your entire being leans toward it. And when you lean into that sense, something opens, not physically, not even emotionally, but dimensionally. It's as though you stretch slightly into an angle you didn't know you could turn toward. And in that stretch, you become aware of something else, someone else, not foreign, not divine, familiar, a presence that feels like home, though you've never had words for it. This presence doesn't speak. It doesn't instruct. It simply exists. And in its silence, you begin to remember, I am not this moment. I am not this story. I'm part of something wider, something still unfolding. The 11th dimension, as postulated by M theory, is not just a backdrop. It's a possibility space, a realm in which all brains exist, all variations of reality unfold, all versions of you might breathe and think and love simultaneously. It's not a fantasy land. It's the space between spaces, the invisible terrain in which your known universe floats. If matter can ripple through these dimensions, why not mind? If strings can vibrate across 10 spatial axes, why can't your awareness echo in more than one place at once? Maybe the mind isn't localized. Maybe it's a traveler, moving not just forward in time, but sideways in being. You think you're anchored to a single timeline, but what if your consciousness exists like a root system? Branches touching multiple realities, each one informing the others in ways you'll never fully grasp. That strange ache you feel sometimes, the sudden swell of emotion for no clear reason, the longing for something you can't name. Maybe that's the friction between your localized awareness and the parts of you that exist elsewhere. Some physicists describe a concept called the implicate order, a hidden structure underlying all things, where everything is enfolded into everything else. In this order, there's no separation between objects, no fixed boundaries between people or moments. It's all connected, interwoven, a single fabric rippling with infinite folds. From this viewpoint, your experience isn't emerging from isolation. It's being expressed from wholeness. This wholeness, then, might be the truer location of self, not a place you go to, a place you already are, but have forgotten how to see. You've grown used to the illusion of division between your thoughts and the world, between your body and the space it moves through, between your name and all the ones you've never answered to. But the veil between them is paper thin, and when you stop mistaking the mask for the face, the whole self begins to shine through. It might not look how you expect. It might not come with answers or visions or divine revelations. Sometimes it shows up as silence, as the sudden collapse of fear, as the simple knowing I am still here. That's all it says. And somehow, that's enough. You don't need to see the full map. You just need to trust that you are part of something vaster than your circumstances, that your pain, your joy, your confusion, all of it, is being witnessed by a version of you who never left the center. This isn't escape. This isn't denial. This is integration, a gathering of all the scattered strands back into one thread, a thread that doesn't end here, that continues across folds and frequencies, telling your story in languages you've never heard, but still understand. And maybe, just maybe, that's why you're here. Not to master one life, but to remember that you are more than one. Not to solve every mystery, but to walk with the wonder of them. The part of you that listens now, that stillness at the core, is already awake. It always has been. It's not waiting for you to become enlightened or worthy. It's waiting for you to notice, to pause, to let the noise fall away and hear the quiet pulse underneath. In that pulse lives the memory, not of events, but of essence. The you that existed before your name, the you that spans dimensions, the you that never forgets what you truly are. You've walked through life believing you are singular, one being, one mind, one story stretched from beginning to end. But what if that was never the full truth? What if the person you know yourself to be is only a surface layer, a skin wrapped around something infinitely broader? Not an illusion, but an expression, not a mask, but a window. And just beyond that window, another version of you waits. Not better, not wiser, just wider. There are moments when the veil becomes so thin you can almost feel it, like a breath against glass. You might be driving, half lost in thought, when suddenly everything sharpens, time slows. A sentence from a stranger lands with the weight of prophecy. A smell fills the air, and for no reason at all, tears rise to your eyes. You don't understand why. You only know that something meaningful has brushed against you, not from the outside, but from within. These moments are not accidents. They're not static in the signal. They're contact. Imagine consciousness not as a flame inside your head, but as a current flowing through space, through time, through dimension. A field of awareness moving like wind across water, sometimes stirring waves, sometimes carving silence. You are not the wind. You are not even the water. You are the awareness of both, arising in form only long enough to ask, what am I? You are not trying to become something greater. You are trying to remember what you never stopped being. Perhaps this is what the mystics meant when they spoke of union, not joining with a divine other, but collapsing the illusion of separation between the many layers of your own being. And what is union, if not the realization that you were never divided to begin with? The physicists call it elegance, the way a unified theory draws together the contradictions of our world into something coherent. The mystics call it stillness. The poets call it truth. And the child within you calls it home. The 11th dimension, in the language of theoretical physics, is not a place you visit. It is the possibility space, the hidden geometry within which every experience, every atom, every flicker of thought finds its place. It holds the spaces between the known, and within it, perhaps, lie all the threads of you that never made it into this version of your story. Maybe there are pieces of you that woke up in a different house, wearing a different name, following a different heartbeat. Maybe in the folds of that unseen dimension, versions of your consciousness stretch out like constellations, each shining a different part of the whole. Not metaphorically, literally, because if reality is built from membranes rippling through higher dimensional space, if the laws of physics demand a deeper structure than what your senses allow, then how could your awareness be an exception? You are not apart from the universe. You are woven from it. Every time you felt a presence with no body, every time you've known something before it happened, Every time you've ached for a memory that doesn't belong to this life, maybe that was you, whispering across dimensions. Not a fantasy, not a ghost, just more of yourself reaching through the invisible. This is not the kind of truth that demands belief. It's the kind that lingers quietly, like a candle still glowing after the room has gone dark. You may not be able to name it, but you feel its warmth in your bones. You carry it in your dreams, in the moments of déjà vu, in the silence that stretches longer than logic can explain. And sometimes you glimpse it in others. Someone speaks a phrase you've never heard, and it unlocks a flood of recognition. A stranger's face reminds you of something long forgotten. You find yourself drawn to places you can't explain, only to discover something waiting there. An emotion, a memory, an encounter. Perhaps those are not coincidences. Perhaps those are reunions, not with other people, but with other parts of yourself. Because if your being is layered across dimensions, then every meeting is a kind of alignment, a folding of timelines, a touch between versions. And in that touch, something becomes clearer. You are not just on a journey. You are a journey. You are not walking through time. You are what time walks through. When you look at the stars and feel something in your chest pull tight, that's not poetry. That's resonance. That's your awareness stretching across its own forgotten edges and remembering how vast it truly is. Some will say, this is a mystical language wrapped in science, but maybe it's the other way around. Maybe science, at its edge, is brushing against truths the mystics have always known. That presence is not confined, that being is not singular, that awareness is not a byproduct of biology, but the canvas on which all things are painted. You don't need to wait for a quantum experiment or a breakthrough theory to validate what you already feel. The evidence is in your experience, in your dreams that speak in symbols more ancient than language, in the way your body knows when something is wrong, even before you understand why, in the way your heart opens to a piece of music or a face or a moment as if welcoming something it always knew was real. And maybe that's what healing really is. Not fixing something broken, but remembering something whole. You aren't here to become more. You're here to uncover what was always there. That's why grief doesn't only feel like loss, it feels like remembering. That's why joy doesn't feel like something new. It feels like something returned. That's why silence, when it's deep enough, doesn't feel empty, it feels full. Because beneath all your identities, your roles, your thoughts, your history, there is a core that has never changed, a core that observes without judgment, that endures without effort, that watches this life unfold like a dream, knowing it is both the dreamer and the dreamed. The you that listens now isn't just the result of neurons firing. It is a witness that has no age, no origin, no edge. This awareness didn't begin with your first breath, and it won't vanish with your last. It is older than memory and deeper than thought. It wears your face for now, but it has worn others before, and it will wear more still. That's not an esoteric idea. It's a quiet possibility rising from the cracks of modern science and the echoes of ancient insight. And the truth is, you don't have to understand it. You only have to listen, because sometimes understanding is too small a vessel for what wants to be felt. Sometimes the answer isn't in knowing, it's in being. And being, truly being, means standing still in the center of your own existence and saying, I don't know where all the pieces of me are, but I know they are mine. You are not lost. You are spread wide. You are not incomplete. You are unfolding. You are not broken. You are becoming. So maybe the 11th dimension isn't somewhere far away. Maybe it's not a place at all. Maybe it's a state of remembrance. the space inside you where all the versions of your story meet, not to compete but to harmonize, not to prove one right, but to weave them all into something deeper, something truer, something whole. There will still be days when you feel small, when the noise of the world drowns out the whisper of your inner knowing. That's okay. You were never meant to hold the full vastness of your being in every moment. You only need to hold the thread, the one that hums softly beneath everything, the one that says, you are more. More than this day, more than this fear, more than this life. And when the thread pulls tight, when you feel that ache again, don't run from it, don't numb it, follow it. Let it guide you, not to answers but to awareness. Because the truth isn't in the words, and it's in the pause between them. It's in the feeling that rises when you hear something that resonates so deeply it silences your mind. It's in the tears that fall for reasons you can't explain. It's in the part of you that watches yourself without judgment and says, even this is part of me. Even this is sacred. That watcher is you. Not your future self, not your higher self, your whole self. And it has always been here, waiting patiently for you to remember.